This old guy DIY video has to do with extending the life of a utility trailer that served me well for 30 years. So this trailer was homemade, weighs about 850 pounds and has a 3,500 pound axle. So yesterday I was hauling 3,000 pounds of stone with it, and when I got to my destination I noticed that the tire was actually rubbing up here inside the wheel well. And when I looked under the vehicle when it was fully loaded, I could see that the springs were not doing their job. So I made a couple calls to the local trailer places, and they said the springs on this thing were actually from an old car or truck, and it would cost me more to replace the springs than it would to replace the axle. And 98% of the time this trailer does just fine because I don't have it loaded at max capacity. So what I've decided to do today is make some stop blocks that I'm going to put on top of the axle, between the axle and the frame, so when the load maxes out, the frame will actually sit on the block, the spring cannot be compressed any further, and the wheel well will not rub on the tire. So at that point, when I have a 3,000 pound load on here, effectively my only shock absorber is going to be the tire itself, but that should be just fine. And right now I cut these blocks. They're 1 3/4 wide. In my case I needed 2.5 inches high. I measured the distance between the upper fender and the tire, and in this case it was 4.5 inches, and I went down beneath and I had 7 inches between the top of the spring and the frame. So I did the math, came up with a 2.5 inch gap. So if I have this block sitting on top of the frame to stop the trailer from coming down further than 2.5 inches from the bottom, my tires should not rub no matter what type of load I have in there. So now I'll crawl under the trailer and install them. This is what it looks like between the top of the spring and the frame before the install. So now I'll put the block in place. For my proof of concept, I just drilled a 3/8 inch hole in each end of the block, and then I put a heavy zip tie around the spring pack, and it's snug but not tight enough that it should break. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. You'll see now when the load is on, I have this couple of inches left that the frame can come down before it bites into this piece of wood, and we'll see what it looks like when it's loaded. Well, now I have a full load of stone on the trailer. This is a great example of how these trailers get abused or damaged or broken. I went to the quarry and asked for 3,000 pounds of stone, 3720 in stone. The trailer weighs 800 pounds, so I'm at 4,500, and I have an axle rated for 3,500. So you can see I have some clearance on this side, and it was the other side that was rubbing yesterday. So as we come around, you can see here I have about 1.5 inches of clearance yet. So we'll look beneath now and see if the blocks are touching the frame. So looking beneath the trailer, although it's squatting, the frame is not down on the block. You can see the springs are pretty flat on the passenger side. We go over to the driver's side. There's air, light between the block and the frame. The springs are not as compressed. So I guess my theory was a little bit wrong, and when the tire was rubbing on the wheel well, it must have been when I hit bumps on the way home. But either way, I now have positive stops, so hitting bumps or not, I will not cause the tire to run into the fender. And now it's time to get this load off. This is a cost-effective technique to keep the tires from running into the frame by keeping the bed of the trailer a set distance from the axle to ensure you always have clearance. So I hope this idea helped you, and have a great day.